the bill version passed by the Senate and also some marked up language so whatever you wanted. How do you want to proceed here, Katie? We'll leave it up to you.
I'll pull up the highlighted draft.
Okay, so that's Senate amendment on our committee page of Senate Amendment version 2. We passed this bill before a crossover. I don't remember the timing exactly. Senate Health and Welfare Committee took possession of it, not Senate Ag. And remember, it started out here in one of the health committees. I don't remember which one, and we took it. So no surprise really that it went to Health and Welfare in the Senate. Ready anytime you're ready.
Okay, I'll share my screen.
You gotta have a Tesla battery, these things, you never have to charge.
Okay, here we go. Good afternoon, Katie McLean, Office of Legislative Counsel. It's good to be back with you. So what you have in front of you is the report of the Committee on Health and Welfare. And what I tried to do is retain their changes with highlighting as they went through the process. Sometimes I think it's really nice to see the actual language that was added or changed. So that is what you have in front of you, and that's why we're not looking at the as passed by House and Senate version. So I'll walk you through those changes. The first one is in this first subsection. Instead of limits, it now says regulatory limits to pick up the same language that's in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. This subsection D in section 1, it's the same content, but the sentence itself was reorganized. So that comma is highlighted to remind me of the reorganization.
It was just for clarity.
Yes.
Can we just pause on that?
Sure.
So we look at it.
Sure. It reads, without requiring the provision of a universal product code or proof of purchase for each baby food product sold, manufactured, delivered, held, or offered for sale in the state, a manufacturer of baby food shall make publicly available on its website for the duration of the product shelf life, a final baby food product plus 1 month. And then we have what is on that. But that first lead in is what was reorganized.
Okay. So same words, just
Different order. Yeah, the clauses were swapped. And then there's this new subsection H. A few minutes before Senate Health and Welfare was going to vote, there was an issue raised about allowing for time for federal labeling requirements. The other states who have passed this legislation don't have language like this in it, but to recognize the fact that federal law would take precedence over state law, this phrase was added, that nothing in this section shall be construed to conflict with federal law or regulation. So this is recognizing to the extent that there are federal requirements with regard to labeling and the time frame for labeling, that those take precedence over this statute.
Representative Nelson.
So this is in the baby food section, or does this count for both sections, baby food?
It'll be in both. So to start, the infant formula isn't part of the initial part of the bill unless the trigger is met. So this is part of the baby food. And then when the trigger is met, that the infant formula is just integrated into this section.
So this is saying that, am I correct in this? Don't ever assume. So I'm gonna ask that if the trigger is met on, well, I can wait till we get to formula.
That's okay.
Okay, so if the trigger is met on formula, 2 states are California.
Mhm.
And they have to change their label.
Mhm.
This gives them until the FDA approves their label. This gives them the opportunity to continue doing business until such requirement is met with the FDA.
This says that if there is a certain requirement or timeline that is in place because of FDA regulation, that timeline can continue to take its course.
Thank you.
In subsection 2, this is where the infant formula is added. In subsection G, you had this section that talks about infant formula. And that the AG could verify if it was, if there wasn't enough to meet the need, that they could suspend the application of this provision to infant formula. The AG's office testified downstairs that they would like to confer with somebody before making that decision. So Health and Welfare chose consultation with the Commissioner of Health. And also, the AG's testified that just the fact of, it might be too late by the time there's evidence of insufficient formula. And instead, at a time of declining supply might be the time to pull that trigger and pause. So that was added into. So now, very inarticulately said that, what this new sentence says is the Attorney General, in consultation with the Commissioner of Health, shall suspend the application of this section to infant formula if the AG verifies that there is insufficient infant formula in the state to meet the need or evidence of declining supply. So for either of those two reasons, there either is already insufficient or there's evidence of a declining supply of infant formula, then this provision as applicable to infant formula is on hold.
Representative Nelson.
So who would be responsible for the trigger? The mom going to the store, or the stores realizing they're having a hard time meeting, their suppliers are having a hard time meeting a requirement? Or does commission, the health commissioner have food cops that are out there making sure that things are up to snuff?
Not completely sure I understand your question.
So how does the trigger
Say co-ops or cops?
cops? Cops, like the seed cops I talked about the other day.
I just wanted to.
Is there, how will the trigger of evidence of declining supply? What will be who's responsible for that trigger?
The Attorney General's office. And they issue, the second sentence is if they have this evidence and feel that there's a declining supply of infant formula, then the Attorney General's office posts on its office's website the specific dates to which this provision is suspended with regard to infant formula.
But who notifies the AG's office of a declining supply?
I think they either proactively do it or they work with the Commissioner of Health to do it.
And they would work with the supermarkets, or? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If I go into Shaw's, I'm gonna be 63 years old. I don't go down the infant formula aisle at all. But I imagine if I was to go down there and look and saw a bunch of blank spaces, I could make a phone call. Who is gonna notify the Attorney General? We're having a hard time meeting our demand, our supply is dwindling. Is that up to the Grocers Association? Is it up to consumers? Is it all the above?
There's no legal obligation in the bill for anybody to notify the Attorney General's office. This puts the burden on the Attorney General's office to identify when there is a shortage and to respond to it.
So when they go shopping, they better check Shaw's infant formula aisle.
This is a policy decision.
Yeah, I
so-
understand. I just want to make sure we have something that will trip that so that it happens and doesn't. I want to make sure that the mothers have product, safe product, preferably with the on it eventually, but just how is it triggered? Is there something
So I think that the language doesn't answer the question. If everything am I right, Katie, it doesn't really say,
It doesn't put a burden on consumers to report to the Attorney General's office when there's a shortage. But that, there are policy choices you could make if you would like entities to be reporting to the Attorney General's. I think probably have a may situation that consumers may report if they're observing this to the Attorney General's office. Or you could put an obligation on the Attorney General's office to consult with more individuals at a certain frequency of intervals if they see how the supply of infant formula is doing. I think you have different options of how you would like to see that carried out.
Representative Burke.
Is there a commission or someone within our government that they could consult alongside the Commissioner of Health who might have more of a knowledge of the supply of baby formula in the state potentially?
I don't have an answer to that. That is the policy choice that Health and Welfare, but if you have any thoughts, I'm happy to look into it.
Why don't we put a flag here that a couple of questions, but right now there's nothing in the language that says anybody has to tell anything or may tell anything to the AG. There is a section earlier where we say that a consumer can reach out to the AG. That's in the baby food section, I think.
Which will all be integrated into one section when this takes effect.
So then, at that point, we do have language that says a consumer may notify.
The consumer reasonably believes, based on the information provided on the baby food product, that the baby food product is being sold in the state in violation of this section. The consumer may report the baby food product. So that is slightly different because it's about a violation versus a shortage. But you could put there as being sold in violation of this section, or that there is a declining supply. The consumer may report that to the office. We could wordsmith that.
All right, well, why don't we keep moving on here just to see what we've got before we get to the end of the bill.
Okay, this is.
Sorry, Greg, Representative.
I can wait to the end too. It's right in this section, that's what I asked. Shall suspend the application of this section to infant formula. Could that be done not necessarily when we're trying to stand this new legislation up, but it could be done anytime? Like, so say this has been in place for 10 years, but there looks like a decline in supply. Does that mean that they can suspend it 10 years from now when the sale is actually in effect? Okay.
Representative.
Chairman, we, in recent history, this specific issue came up and there was an audit during the pandemic. All of a sudden, there's no toilet paper on the shelf. You'd see a whole aisle, paper goods, napkins, paper towels gone. And that led to the declaration by the governor to include forest products supply chain as essential work. Farmers relied on sawdust in order to fed to cows and that sort of thing. And the same thing happened. There was and some of it had to do with floods or an issue in Mexico, or some areas where we were no longer able to access baby formula. And there was a shortage, and that made it was 3 years ago, post-pandemic.
I remember.
Yeah, so consumers notice immediately if there's a shortage or supply. And I think the consumers are the ones that drive. When there's a shortage of fuel, there were rules about not charging excessive prices. I'm going back to the 1970s when there was a gasoline shortage. So it seems that consumers drive the market, but if there's no supply, they're going to be calling.
There's also, I thought this is where you were going. with that not too long ago, there was an infant formula.
That's.
And it wasn't a secret.
No, and it was
Yeah,
on nightly news.
I suspect if there's a shortage of infant formula, that the Attorney General is not going to be left in the dark about it.
That was,
Yeah, okay.
So
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
we can come back to this question. But let's keep going.
This is only highlighted to update the subsection designation. This section 3 was added to have a parallel provision to the baby product provision in section 1 that says that the stock supply that is that grocers or whoever retailers have in possession at the time of the effect of the provision, they can still sell that. But we don't know what that date will be for infant formula. We know with regard to baby food because we have a date certain, but with infant formula, we have this contingency. So this session law does the same thing, but it doesn't give us a date certain. So the provisions in section 2, that means infant formula, shall not restrict the continued sale of infant formula inventory in stock in Vermont prior to the effective date of section 2 pursuant to section 4B, which is the contingency. So what that is saying again is the infant formula that's in stock in Vermont, when section 2, the infant formula section takes effect, can still be sold. Same as baby food, but for baby food, again, we have the date certain that we know when that piece is going to take effect.
Okay, so in section 4, the highlighted blue, and it says in section 3, infant formula stock supply shall take effect on January 1st of 27. Is that prudent to have that there when we don't know when the other states, when or if the other state's gonna move forward?
So yes, so all that's doing is making that section 3 take effect. But as you'll
Oh,
see,
section 3 takes effect, which says there won't be anything prior to 4B.
yes,
The law.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
yeah, it's just the effect of the section.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Section B, this language on line 11 is significant. So this is your contingency section. And this is saying when California and 2 other states have comparable requirements in law, then Vermont's infant formula section takes effect. The language that you sent over to the House, said, yeah, to the side, thank you.
The body is always a safe.
Yeah, I should have done that. Said when they have passed a law, and just the point that you just brought up is that sometimes when you pass a law is a different date when the law takes effect. So there was a request that this be changed to when the laws are in effect in the other states, not just passed in the other states. So this is what this language does. That's it.
That's it.
We've made it. I think so. We've made it to the end.
Right. So before we lose Ledge Council, who I'm sure has another appointment at 1:30, do we have any other questions about the language, the impact, effect? I will say that while we often have maybe our impression of the work done in the other body is that maybe it doesn't rise to the level of the work that we do here, I think this is pretty good work.
yeah.
Well, I think you had a pretty good coach.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So I know there's been talk about possibly extending the deadline for the labeling of infant formula, so the industry has time to make an adjustment. Nobody's talked about that. It's not here at the beginning, but wondering if that I think I did hear that nothing in this section shall be construed to conflict with federal law or regulation. Would that encompass that?
Yes, so if there is any type of federal regulation that is requiring a certain time frame for labeling, or, you know, if there is a future regulation that conflicts with what you've put in the statute, then the federal FDA would take precedence. That regulation would take precedence here.
Sorry, what does the turquoise indicate on here?
That they made that at a later, that change was made at a later point in time.
But these are both, the yellow and the
Yes.
blue are both changes from the Senate.
They're only, the difference in colors is only significant to the Senate
Okay,
process.
all right, got it. I just was
Good question.
wanting to be sure.
So if we look at the version as passed by the Senate, it just doesn't have the color.
It doesn't have the colors.
Maybe some other format.
Yeah, I've been working really hard to try to retain colors in the other bodies drafts when I come over, because I think it is helpful to see exactly where the language was changed and reconsidered.
Helpful, thank you.
I want to go over some sarcasm with you when I present this on the floor, just maybe you can tell me I shouldn't do it or I
All
can't.
right, we'll consult on that.
Maybe let counsel to help
If
you
it's your
with
main.
your humor.
You're out of luck if you do.
If you happen to run into Senator Gulick on the way downstairs, if you're going downstairs.
Okay,
If she'd like to come in still, we'd be happy to hear.
okay, okay.
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure if they are still on the floor or.
They were wrapping up, and I know she had mentioned it to me today that she had planned to come up, so I'm not sure. Maybe lunch is only open for another 20 minutes or so, so that could be too. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
let me know if you need anything.
So, we have, thank you, Katie. We
Thank you.
have, Bill Driscoll, who had asked to speak, and if you want to come up, Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I had a chance to talk to some of you folks about our concerns here, but not everybody. You could catch up. Bill Driscoll for Association of Vermont. Katie did a good job of sort of pointing out that sort of at the last minute in the Senate committee, when we're trying to, in under crunch time, there were 3 issues of various ways of timing on things that we flagged, that the committee then tried to address. There was what do you do with the infant formula that's in stock in that transition period? There's being clear about the trigger being the effective date of the other states. And then there was accommodating the FDA review of labeling. And there were changes in the bill as highlighted here that sought to address all 3 of those things, which we certainly appreciated. With regard to the stock and the effective date, I think the language that they did certainly addressed that issue. However, the language which they intended to solve the FDA labeling issue, while we certainly appreciate the intent that they were trying to fix that, the actual language doesn't actually fix the issue. And unfortunately, there really wasn't time to try to address that in the Senate. So just to sort of walk through what the concern is and then, proposed fix. So first of all, new labels, any label for infant formula has to meet fairly strict FDA regulatory requirements. So if there's a new label, the industry will come up with a proposed label design or a new proposed label and submit that to FDA review. Now, the rub comes in sort of what happens next, because as written here, what the bill says is nothing in this law shall conflict with FDA regulations and requirements. However, there's a difference between technically what's required in the law and what's actually practiced. Technically, if the FDA does not respond to that submitted new label after 90 days, technically, legally, the companies could proceed with that label regardless of the FDA confirming that it's okay. In practice, no company does that because no company wants to invest in a brand new label, print it, ship it, and then have the FDA eventually come back to them and say, well, actually, this doesn't really comply here, there, or there. So as a practical matter, they will not proceed until the FDA says, we have no further questions, we have no objections to this label. And it gets very technical, but you know, lawyers love technicalities in the legal departments of companies. As far as this language goes, that's in the bill. Again, we appreciate the intent. But technically, after that 90-day window, if the FDA has not yet signed off on the label, and therefore the companies are not going to proceed, and this is putting aside the point that then they have to actually manufacture and distribute the labels. Technically, there's no real conflict per se, because they are legally allowed to go ahead, even though in practice they won't. Therefore, you could still end up in a situation where Vermont could be requiring that there be the new labels, but the FDA has not signed off yet on it yet, even though technically the companies could, they're not going to proceed until the FDA does. So there are different ways you could try to address that concern. Our primary recommendation would have been to just have the AG come back with legislative recommendations when the trigger is met, and then whatever timing issues just be addressed then. I know a lot of people would prefer to have something that's just automatic off the shelf. So to try to accommodate that, what we would suggest is an additional provision in the effective dates. So you have everything that's in the bill now. So in other words, you have section B, and you have B in section 4, which says California or 2 other states, they have laws that are in effect. The AG certifies that, and it's effective in Vermont. And that can be the baseline or the default. In order to avoid a situation where that timing might come when the FDA has not said that the label is okay yet, we would recommend having sort of a C, a separate provision that says notwithstanding the trigger in B. That infant formula will not be required to have the new label. This will not apply to an infant formula sooner than a year after the FDA has given an okay to the label. And what will that do? That will provide some time for, once there is approval or a sign off by the FDA, then you can have the actual production of the new label, and it goes into commerce and whatnot. But that would at least provide it. And depending on what happens in the other states, that might be a moot issue, because say a state passes a law, and by the time this law is triggered in Vermont, companies have already submitted a new label to the FDA. It's been approved for that other state and whatnot, because presumably everybody's going to be looking for a national label. But if we're going to have like an automatic trigger, and we don't know what the other states are going to require for timelines, and we don't know whether or not the FDA will have said everything's okay with a new label today, we need to build in some sort of buffer, some sort of provision to accommodate that uncertainty. So that's what we would recommend, is simply saying, notwithstanding the trigger that's in the bill now, if it hasn't been at least a year since the FDA approved a label, or you provided notice that a label was acceptable, that it doesn't apply until then. So and I have language I can send to the Ledge Council. I'm sorry, to Patty. I think I've sent some to some folks, but I'll just send that right now anyway. But that's essentially it. It's basically just making sure that we don't run into a situation where there's a conflict between this is required in Vermont, but the companies aren't prepared to move forward because they haven't heard back from the FDA.
Okay, questions?
Why 1 year? Excuse me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Why 1 year from when they get okay for their approval?
To be honest,
I'm just asking the question.
yeah, and I'll be very honest with you, we're trying to accommodate people's feedback, and that's enough to be sure that we have enough time, because obviously they're not going to make these new labels until.
Understood.
So taking a guess as to what would be enough time to make sure there's time to actually produce the labels, update the packaging and get it on the shelves and whatnot.
And roll out the stock that's on shelf.
It may take longer, it may take less time, but to the extent you want to put a hard requirement in the bill now, we had to pick a time. So that was our guess. And I mean, in the future, if we get a better refinement, I'm happy to discuss changing that time. But I mean, that would be a good sort of default guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't believe that up here where, first of all, it says nothing in this section shall be construed to conflict with federal law, and back up further. It talks about we won't run stuff out of stock. We're not gonna.
Mhm.
We're, in consultation with the Commissioner of Health, shall suspend the application as problem evidence of a declining supply.
Mhm.
You don't think that suffice to cover that time gap?
Sure. So the declining supply thing, that's a little, honestly, there could be just about wording that a little bit better, but that's kind of like closing the barn door after the horse is gone. I mean, if you're dealing with a situation where there's a declining supply, you're already having a pretty serious problem that, I mean, it's not a simple flip a switch and then all of a sudden the supply issue is solved. And the conflicting language, or I'm sorry, the sell-through language, that kind of has the same problem as the conflicting language. In other words, say the two other states, we've reached they're in effect. That means it's infected. That means it's in effect in Vermont. That means that's okay for stuff that's on the shelf then. But if the companies aren't going to provide the new stock until that label is approved in the system, that gap is not covered by that sell-through provision.
But you don't suppose that if California or two other states are working on this same legislation,
Mhm.
they're not gonna have language in there as well that says, understanding the labeling changes and whatnot. So they may push their effective date out
To accommodate that.
to accommodate that. So when Vermont takes effect, the labeling's already been in effect.
Yeah, and one would certainly hope that they do. I would hope that they do, but we don't know. People, states pass bad legislation all the time. Because this approach of this bill is to sort of fire and forget. In other words, you're setting up criteria and this is going to go in effect regardless, right? There's nothing else in this bill that requires that those other states take that stuff into consideration. So we don't know whether they will or not. Even though we hope, if they do, then this is a moot because they'll be taken care of. But if they don't, we need something in our law to protect us against that scenario. Yeah.
Representative Burt.
For clarification, when did you say you would for the date of 1 year to start?
It's when the FDA, so the FDA will notify the companies, we have no more questions or concerns about your labels. They're as far as we're concerned, they're. And then, so that's the date where the companies would then, of course, proceed to actually print and manufacture the labels, put them, So the 1 year is meant to accommodate that sort of actually getting the new labels into the system. Yeah.
Are we gonna have time for a committee discussion after this?
Yeah, and I think we'll still see if Senator Gulick can join us before we do that. Before we go. All right, thank you very much.
No problem.
And I think what we'll do is slide right into our next bill. And then we're scheduled, I think, to have Bradley until 2 or 2:10, something like that. We probably won't have enough time to cover and answer all our questions on H 941, the municipal regulation of agriculture bill. But as Bradley's coming up to the table, I will say there is a new draft amendment on our page that we'll have Bradley pull up. It's a strike all. And I gave Bradley some feedback gave him some instructions based on the feedback that I heard in committee just through conversations last week. This is the Senate bill. This is our bill, H 941, with a Senate amendment. Now I've put in a couple of additional amendments. So
Is this draft number 3.1?
sounds about right. Yep. And say Bradley will tell us it's not been edited, and that's fine. I think the key things that are different here are the treatment of the poultry exemption. And the study. Gosh, is there anything else, Bradley? Well, you can walk and show us, but
Bradley Showman, Office of Legislative Counsel. So yeah, those are the primary pieces. And hemp is added to the exclusion of growing plants. And so, well, I'll walk you through the changes. I do have to leave. I have to be in House Environments at 2.
okay.
And so I'll walk through the changes here. So first, we're changing a little bit in the purpose section to kind of reflect the changes. I won't go over that in detail, but those are there and highlighted for you to consider. Section 2. So you'll notice that this is H 941 as amended by the Senate. It includes provisions of swine waste that we discussed not too long ago. But now we're going all the way down on page 4, subsection B. So this is the exception from municipal regulation of agriculture for growing plants, right? And so this exception is meant to broaden the exception from municipal regulation of agriculture to growing plants, regardless of whether it's subject to the RAPS. And so the Senate version adds fiber Christmas trees and a list of things. And then this version, based on instruction, adds that cannabis and hemp are excluded from this exception. Cannabis is the only thing excluded from the exception on the Senate side.
We've added hemp here to this.
Yes. So, hemp is an agricultural product. If it's farmed subject to the RAPS, then, it would be subject to the RAPS and so protected from municipal zoning and regulation by bylaw. Cannabis is not. But cannabis also has other protections in the law that kind of work on this piece in the background that give it roughly the same exception that agriculture products get for being subject to the RAPS.
Representative Nelson.
In 323, S323, extensive work we did on the hemp section.
Mhm.
Is hemp still subject to the RAPS upon passage of that, if it passes?
Yes, hemp is still.
Will it still be subject to the RAPS, or will it then become under control of the Cannabis Control Board?
Growing hemp is still subject to the RAPS.
Growing hemp, okay, thank you.
And this did not change from this just changed in versions that I was sharing with Representative Durfee. So the construction of farm structures is another exemption from the municipal regulation by bylaw. And so the construction of farm structures is subject to the RAPS. And we made sure to keep this addition here that says including as defined in the RAPS rule, because farm structures as it's defined in statute is slightly different than farm structures as defined in the RAPS rule. In statute here, it means a building, enclosure, fence for housing livestock, raising horticultural or agronomic crops, or carrying out other practices associated with accepted farming practices, including a silo. And the biggest difference between that and the RAPS is waste management structures. And arguably, waste management structures are included here, but adding the caveat that waste management structures are exempt from municipal regulation by bylaw adds some clarity there. And then we took out the poultry section from this is the section that we're discussing right here is the prohibition on municipal regulation by law. So the poultry exemption lived here in the Senate version, and it has now moved. And so I highlighted this E to kind of reflect that we're renumbering sections. And now the poultry exception lives in 24 VSA 4412. And so required provisions of prohibited effects is the name of this section. And so notwithstanding any existing bylaw, the following land development provision shall apply in every municipality. No bylaw shall have the effect of prohibiting or assessing a fee for raising, feeding, or management of a poultry flock, excluding roosters, for personal use, donation, or sale. As used in this section, poultry has the same meaning as 6 VSA 1459-4, which means any domesticated bird. And so this section would permit some ordinances to regulate poultry flock. It could permit things like setbacks, requiring to have a coop, requiring fencing, limiting the number of poultry, and things of that sort. So municipalities could regulate these things, but they can't have the effect of prohibiting raising, feeding, or management of a poultry flock. So this is similar to what's the bill in Maine that's going on. They kind of left it to municipalities to suss out what that means. But in statute, it's kind of like the backstop where you can't prohibit this activity, but you can regulate it. Section 4, I made no changes, but in the Senate version of this, they brought the RAPs back in to amend the RAPs to conform with the statute and changes to the statute. And we've gone over those previously, so I'm scrolling past them. And now we are on page 11. Section 5 here on page 11 adds in back in the study as it was in H941 that the House sent over to the Senate. So this doesn't make any changes, but this adds the study back in that you folks are familiar with. And I'm happy to go over it quickly. But basically, the Secretary of Agriculture convenes a stakeholder group that examines conflicts between landowners and livestock. And at minimum, the stakeholder group includes membership based agriculture organizations, the Vermont League, Farm to Plate, and individuals with local expertise in local and regional planning, as well as zoning administration. And then it looks at options to address conflicts between municipalities and including looking to address conflicts, including establishing and expanding the RAPs, regulating livestock, particularly addressing stocking densities on parcels of less than 10 acres, utilizing ordinances to address livestock, protecting the right to grow food for personal consumption, including livestock, creating rules like the Cannabis Control Board to enforce against an operation based on health, safety, or integrity of the broader industry. And then the report is due on January 31st, 2027 to the relevant committees.
In that, this language is picked up verbatim from what we.
Yeah, verbatim. So it doesn't necessarily, other studies might like list out specifically who the members are, provide a per diem and things of that sort. This bill doesn't do that. But it kind of just gives some principles.
Bradley, and I'm sorry that I didn't have a chance to look this over earlier. We had talked about a section that would prohibit municipalities from charging a fee.
Yep. And so that is part of 15. So section 3, we're going back up to page 6. It's about the poultry flock. No bylaw shall have the effect of prohibiting or assessing a fee for raising, feeding, or management of livestock. So of poultry.
No bylaw shall have the effect of prohibiting.
Or assessing a fee for.
So in other words, so they couldn't charge you $10 a chicken to have
That's correct.
6 chickens.
It's already,
What?
but they're not prohibiting it, but they can regulate it, so they could do setbacks.
And then sort of the next question, under this language, could a municipality say, you can have chickens or other poultry, but you can only have X number?
I think that's right. Yeah. I mean, I think flock assumes that at least 2. But other than that, there's not a number here that prevents a municipality from saying you can't have more than 2 birds.
So could, hypothetically, town could do that. All right. Other sort of legal questions for Ledge Council while we have them. And then we're going to go back to our other bill.
Good.
Okay. Good, Bradley. I think then we'll have some discussion. We'll get back to you. I know you have other things that you're working on today. Are you free at all later in the afternoon if we maybe I can just find you if I need to.
I mean, if you need me later in the afternoon, and you could confer with Representative Kornheiser on Ways and Means, to permit me to present my amendment in the morning, then we could do that. Otherwise, if you'd like me.
I think, because I didn't do the favor she was asking of me, so I don't think she's gonna turn around and do me a favor.
The wheeling and
We
dealing.
will make it work, though.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. Okay, thank you very much.
So committee, thoughts before we leave this? Well, this one is still fresh. Anything that folks want to say?
First blush, I like it.
Okay. Representative Brigham.
Heard about the swine? Are we just regulating swine
Swine waste.
waste? What
Yep.
about the other animals?
It does not include the other animals. And so that would be swine waste on parcels greater than 4 acres, right? So on less than 1 acre, a municipality may regulate by bylaw the raising, feeding, or management of livestock. On 1 to 4 acres, they can regulate it if the Agency of Agriculture does not regulate it. So Agency of Agriculture is only going to regulate the raising, feeding, or managing of livestock on 1 to 4 acres if there's a sufficient land base for appropriate nutrient and waste management. So it just depends on that middle piece, and then 4 and above, a municipality, if it's subject to the RAPs but cannot regulate it, with the exception of swine waste. So if you have a farm that's 4.5 acres in a downtown or village center, so those important things to remember. But if you have a farm that's 5-6 acres in a downtown or village center, there's important caveats, because that swine waste only applies to those caveats. A municipality may regulate the swine waste by setting performance standards for dealing with it.
Representative Dawson, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, 2 birds seems really small to me. I mean, I just did a quick definition search, and chicken flocks, the definition that comes up is 3 to 6 birds, which still actually 6 maybe seems okay as a minimum. But I mean, if somebody's really trying to raise chickens to either bring in income or food for themselves, 2 chickens is not really an adequate number. So, I mean, if we're sending another version of this back to the Senate anyways, I wouldn't mind saying backyard chicken flocks of 6 or more. And then if the town wants to limit them to 6, at least they can have 6. But I think 2 is small, if that's what.
Two's a pair, it's not a flock.
I agree.
I agree as well. I want to be mindful that we're not just talking about chickens. So that we would have to say the 6 would apply to all turkeys as well.
Okay.
And maybe that's fine. But unless we started enumerating every poultry animal.
I mean, if the town actually challenged this, who determines what a flock is? You know, I mean, a quick.
And I think that would be the court, right? And so it would be a court to determine what the common definition of flock is.
Okay, so if the common definition is 3 to 6, they could say, okay, you can only have 3.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But that seems like if the idea is we're trying to protect the right for people to have access to this as a food source, then I don't know. I feel I would like to have the number 6 in it, but if you think it's going to put a cog in the wheel, and
No, I think it's a very good point. So, Representative Nelson.
And I'm gonna go back to no, they're gonna be the chicken police. I think most municipalities aren't gonna go out, someone's got 6 or 10 chickens that are properly taken care of. They're not gonna go out there and say, you can only have 3, or 2, that just, I agree, Michelle, it doesn't make sense. Essex is one of the few municipalities I know that has a number, and they have 6. So I don't know if what's St. Albans have, Jack?
There's some number, but I think the city,
Um,
the town doesn't have it.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's all.
Representative Burke.
It is probably worth mentioning that the reason why we're going over this was because of the poultry flock. So
Because of what?
because of a poultry flock.
Yeah, yes.
So it's worth trying to get it right.
I suppose we could say specific to chickens, no fewer than 6. And then not address other birds, other types of birds, which would give the town more flexibility in other cases than.
You're allowed up to 8
It feels like chickens are hard.
for chickens, not animals, just chickens.
I mean, and
Yes.
as, you know, and poultry is emu too, you know, and so, I mean, the birds can get pretty big. And so, you know, that is,
Maybe we should just narrow it to chicken.
yeah, so that, I mean, obviously that's a policy choice, but, you know, I think when kind of trying to suss out what are the effects of this bill and things of that sort, it is important to consider what animals that we are talking about. Because even the difference between chicken and turkey, the size is quite a bit. And so it's worth considering those things as well.
I'm gonna suggest, Bradley, that we send you off and we'll let.
Yes, I need to go.
Yeah, I wonder if we could,
Just a sec, I was gonna say, let's send you off with instructions, not for today, but to add some language that says specifically for chickens, it needs to be no fewer than 6.
yeah,
Sort of a floor, and then not address other animals,
yeah,
other birds.
you could say raising, feeding or management of a poultry flock, excluding, or you could say the management of chickens to 6. And then poultry flock excluding roosters, personal use, blah, blah, blah. Somewhere put chickens in there, then leave poultry flock, so you can only have 2 turkeys or 2 guinea fowl.
I think that's good.
And another thing to point out too is that a court might define a flock differently. Like I just looked it up in Merriam-Webster's and there isn't a number. And a courts will go to a dictionary as part of, you know, what is the colloquial definition of a flock? So, you know, some people might think it's 2, some people might think it's 3, some people might think it's larger. And so it is up to a court to determine, but I am out of time. So thank you.
Yeah,
Right.
flock.
Thank you. All right, Senator Gula. Thank you for joining us.
I have a bad back, I'm sorry. I'm all hunched over. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and if you'd rather stand, that would be more.
Oh, thank you. That, I would love to have a standing desk, but, I don't, so I'm happy to sit. I'm happy to sit. Thank you. What can I do for you today?
Well, so we just had a few minutes with Ledge Council walking through the changes that the Senate made to H 536. And I think that the Senate passed directly what came out of your committee. So I think we have pretty good understanding of what that was. You didn't have the opportunity to hear her or hear our questions, but we wanted just to give you an opportunity to speak to the bill as you amended it. Should also say that we then heard from representative of the industry with a request specific to the labeling timing, and I'm not going to try to characterize that, but first we'll give you a chance to say whatever you'd like to say, and then maybe the committee will have questions.
All I would say is I presented my floor report and it was very well received. The bill passed unanimously out of the Senate and, there was just a lot of, I think, feeling of collaboration and thankful for the work we had done. So we didn't have any concerns. I can tell you that much. So I'm not exactly sure what the labeling issue is. We felt like there was that check back mechanism with the Attorney General, and there was the, ability to sell off supply. And there just seemed like there were a lot of belts and suspenders on the bill. So we felt at the end of the day, everyone felt really good about it. But if there's something specific.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Senator, talking to, in committee, you had 2 senators vote against it. And I asked them what their concern was. And their concern was on the effect of labeling and how you change a label, you have to go to the FDA to get approval for a label change. I too thought that you had a lot of belt and suspenders on this, and with the take effect date instead of passing, was great. And nothing in this section shall be construed to conflict with federal law or regulation. And this is an if, we thought that we should put in something to the fact that upon, submitting the label change, there would be a certain amount of time before that would go effect to allow FDA to okay it, and then industry to make their labels, apply their labels, move their old stock out of inventory through the consumers. Or do you feel that's not needed because we have all these other safeguards in there? I guess is my question to you.
I really appreciate you bringing that up. And two of my wonderful colleagues did vote no in our committee. And I don't necessarily want to speak for them, but they did change their vote on the Senate floor, both of them. And without patting myself on the back, they did say that my floor report actually explained some things that they didn't understand and they weren't clear about. Because honestly, the Consumer Reports report was so helpful to me, and we hadn't really gone over it in committee, but over that weekend when I was preparing my floor report, I read it. I read the Florida blurb from the governor of Florida, and so I just came to the floor with more information than some of the folks in committee had. I think it was really helpful to them, and that's why we ended up with such a great vote. But to your point, I think at the end of the day, after they fully understood the big picture, they felt comfortable with the labeling and the timeline and all sort of the checkbacks and the inventory cell and all of that. So that's they thanked me at the end. So again, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I think it was helpful. So yeah, but that is a good question. They initially had some concerns.
Operation Stork Speed couldn't have come out at a better time.
Right. Exactly.
It really made us feel good about what we had done.
Yeah, you guys did a great job.
The industry is doing the proper things, and now they just failed for them to allow people to know.
Yeah, you did an awesome job. And I was asked a question about the company that's up in, I think St. Albans and I mean, it was really helpful for me to look at this great list of all of the various formulas to see their safety levels. And I was able to say Perrigo makes a lot of really safe formulas. So that's not the issue there. So that was helpful. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. Are any other questions or concerns or?
Representative Burke.
Trying to get Perrigo to stay in St. Albans.
Georgia.
I know, people aren't having as many babies anymore.
The power supply is greater in Wisconsin.
Okay.
But perhaps if we could find them $30-40 million to help do the upgrades to that factory.
That's likely.
So we were actually commending the Senate for the work that it's done. Sometimes we grumble about changes. I think that that's not the case here. So thank you.
Thank you. Seems like this good work on both sides. So I appreciate all your work.
Anything else that you wanted to add or any other questions? I noticed that the Attorney General's office has come into the room. So if there are questions that committee has for the Attorney General's office, since the Attorney General was mentioned in this bill, I'm guessing that it's not a coincidence that it came in. But if the committee would like, we could direct questions to the Attorney General's staff, Assistant Attorney General. Thank you, Senator.
Take a seat, take the hot seat. That's the
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Delos, Assistant Attorney General. Not just, I do love the Ag Committee, but not just random that I popped into the room. I'm more than happy to answer questions. I think we remain very, very supportive of where the bill was when it came out of this chamber, and likewise the version that the Senate has put together. I don't want to restate the testimony I provided you all several months ago. I will just say in the role of consumer advocate and in our work as providing increased consumer protection, this bill focuses on the most vulnerable consumers in Vermont. And we think it is an important bill. It does two very important things. It focuses on a potential danger to children in their most vulnerable stage. And it's really about consumer education, right? It's about giving consumers clear knowledge when they purchase a product, what the product may contain, what the testing levels may be. It's not an outright ban across the board per se, though that is something in the offing. And I think it does the right balance of ensuring the product remains on the shelf and ensuring that folks understand what that product contains. Our role in it has shifted a little bit, but we're comfortable with where we sit now. I think the main one, and I'm happy to answer questions on this, is I guess there are two. One is the triggering clause that if two states or the state of California pass anything regarding a similar restriction on infant formula, we inform this body and the chamber below downstairs meeting. And then that new provision springs into life following that notification. And then the second is working with the Department of Health around if there's a shortage or a potential future shortage of infant formula, the ability to pause the application of the law to that infant formula. In a previous position, I worked more closely with the Department of Health, and I'll just say there was a time when I think this committee may be aware, I think it was 2023 or 2024, there was a recall of infant formula, and the Women, Infant, and Children Program, WIC, was aware of it very early on and working pretty closely. The administration was very responsive to ensure that we were protecting the supplies of infant formula, and I would presume that if something came down the pike similar related to the availability of infant formula, that kind of conversation would occur with the AGO.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you for that, Counselor. That's one of the concerns I had was if the labeling, the labeling kerfuffle, FDA is going to approve the label, they got to have time to make the labels, fix the labels, assume they want to run their old stock out, not relabel. And if, according to Operation Stork Speed, things are in great shape anyway. And we don't want to run short supply here in Vermont. So I asked how would that trigger be made? But as you said, WIC is a big watcher of all this stuff, and that's great. And thank you for that information.
Absolutely. I don't know, do you want me to speak to any of those other pieces?
Yeah.
I know there was a question around labeling is an interesting area of federal overlap. The FDA does tightly constrain sort of what appears on the nutrition label. I am not an expert in food labeling, and I'm not an expert in FDA labeling of baby food or infant formula products. I will say I have worked based on the work of this body in the early teens when the Vermont legislature required labeling of genetically engineered foods. And that was a big topic of conversation around that bill. And I think it's chapter 82. I just had to look it up. It is still chapter 82A in Title IX. That required the labeling. We did a lot of work around that to ensure that the labeling language in the bill didn't run afoul of the FDA. Ultimately, that law was only in effect for 30 days because the federal government preempted it with a subsequent piece of legislation. But we felt comfortable with the language of requiring labeling. And ultimately, those labels occurred on M&Ms, Coca-Cola, Frito-Lay products, and of course, across lots of retail establishments.
Nothing natural in Coca-Cola, so there wouldn't be any GMOs in that. That's for sure.
So I don't see anything in this language that causes concern on that front. But again, I have not delved too deeply into it.
Right. Good. Well, thank you for being attentive and committee thoughts. So we are, this bill was on the up for action this morning. As you probably heard, Richard stood up and asked for a delay of a day so that we could see it and take some testimony. We will be on the floor again tomorrow afternoon at 1. So that's when this will come up. Are we feeling like we're ready to make a decision now? And our choices are always to concur. So this was, our bill that came back from the Senate. We can concur with the Senate's proposal. We can concur with further amendment. You'll hear, right? People sometimes concur with proposal of further amendment. We can, after a conference committee, if it feels like we've gone back and forth enough, then it's time to bring things together. Or we can do nothing. It's also hypothetically one of our options. Representative Lipsky.
I in favor of concurring. Question, when the body is ready, open up a full committee, will we straw poll or will we take a vote to concur or?
So, yeah, we will take we'll take a vote, and I think technically it is a straw poll. But since we don't have the bill, and this is where things get a little bit confusing, when a bill comes back, it isn't assigned to a committee. And we are the committee of jurisdiction. It was our bill in the first place. So we will be asked, when you make the report, for the committee straw poll vote. Yeah. I think probably it's a good practice to write it down and not just have it be, show of hands. But it's not strictly speaking a vote the same way we voted it up the first time.
Is it still desired to wait for the member from Sunbury?
Well, yeah, Greg was, I'm sorry, John is on the road and he said he thought he would be here between 1 and 2. I haven't gotten any other communication from him, so. Michelle.
I would just say I agree with Representative Lipsky. I think we should go ahead and concur and move it forward. I think this is one of our most important bills this year. And we don't want to take a chance that it's not going to pass or that we have some muddy conference committee. I think we should concur and move it forward.
Somebody else have a hand up? Okay, great.
I personally would like to see an amendment to give a little more time for the labeling. Make sure that that's not be a hiccup.
So something to respond in response to the testimony we heard earlier.
Yes. I know it's got a lot of belts and suspenders on it already, but it's an important issue, I think, to make sure we get it right. So that's my stance.
Other things.
I'd just say concur, let's get this out and have no risk of it. Making.
I agree, that would be devastating. Work hard on it.
That might even make that motion if I may.
Well, I think I did say we would wait and see if Representative O'Brien was here, so let's do that.
Chair, we also have time tomorrow morning,
In theory, yeah.
because it's coming up on the floor tomorrow, so.
Yeah, however, we want to also do the municipal regulation question tomorrow too, so. But yes.
If we're to, depends if we're moving to concur, moving to amend. After reading and hearing from the Assistant Attorney General, I feel confident in concurring. I think the safeguards are in place and they're not gonna run stuff off the shelves. at all. 100% at all.
I mean, I think I was made somewhat more comfortable by the point that this won't happen until it happens in another state, at least one other state, and those states will have the opportunity of looking at what we did, and this will be, a discussion that they're having too. John.
We also have paraquat on notice, so we're gonna have to deal with that in the morning as well.
Yeah. Let's take a break. We've been sitting here for a bit now. We do have another witness who may be waiting. Here's our next witness. Okay, good. Thank you for your patience. Let's take no more than 10 minutes and we'll return.